A series of gas pipelines running between Russia and Germany is at the centre of an international dispute. It's called Nord Stream 2, and as its construction nears completion, there's mounting pressure to put a stop to this controversial project. In August 2020, a Russian political leader and opponent of Vladimir Putin, Alexei Navalny, was hospitalized after being exposed to the nerve agent Novichok. The attempt on his life was allegedly carried out by Russian Federal Security Service agents on behalf of the Kremlin. The assassination attempt and Navalny's subsequent jailing prompted condemnation from political leaders around the world and saw widespread calls for increased economic sanctions on Russia. It also led to renewed calls for German Chancellor Angela Merkel to abandon the Nord Stream 2 project.
So the Navalny puts an emphasis on Russia's misdeeds, and the question is Germany really going to support and again finish the silver platter pipe deal right as Russia continues to do unacceptable things according to international norms?
Do you think Russia have arrested Navalny to use him as a bargaining chip, which they wouldn't have had otherwise, that then releases them from sanctions and gets the deal over the line?
Certainly, Navalny has been a thorn in the side of the Putin administration for a number of years, and these things may not be connected. What would be interesting, though, is if a concession by releasing Navalny does help as an alternative to putting sanctions on Russia.
Russia denies being involved in the assassination attempt of Navalny and denies that his subsequent arrest was politically motivated. The Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines run beneath the Baltic Sea alongside the first Nord Stream pipelines, which were completed in 2011. The pipeline enters the Baltic near St. Petersburg in Russia and stretches 765 miles along the seabed, before coming ashore again at Greifswald in northeast Germany. The new pipelines, which are due to begin operating in early 2021, can carry 55 billion cubic meters of gas per year, potentially doubling the capacity of gas which can be pumped directly to Germany from Russia. While the Nord Stream 2 project is funded by a consortium of 5 European energy companies from France, Austria, Germany, Britain and the Netherlands, Russian majority state-owned energy company Gazprom is the sole stakeholder. For Russia, how important is Nord Stream 2?
There are commercial interests here at play that Gazprom wants to monopolize, and there is a fear that now increasing exports of LNG are kind of challenging the position of Gazprom.
The $11 billion project has, however, faced widespread criticism ever since the deal was inked in 2015. Much of the opposition stems from the US, which worries that the new pipe will expand the Kremlin's influence in the region, while several Central and Eastern European countries are also concerned about growing dependence on Russian energy. Another country strongly opposed to the project is Ukraine, which has been in a protracted conflict with Russia since 2014. Before the completion of the first Nord Stream pipelines, 80% of gas supplied by Russia to the EU went through the country. However, the gas supply wasn't always reliable due to long-standing disputes between the two neighbours. While the Nord Stream projects are set to ensure a steady supply of gas to the EU, Ukraine stands to lose lucrative transit fees.
We've had a situation of a political standoff between the two countries, and they're very keen to channel gas towards Europe through any other route that they can.
Even though Nord Stream 2 has been dubbed the pipeline for Europe's energy future, Germany stands to reap the biggest rewards from the project. Lower wholesale gas prices would give a significant boost to businesses and consumers in the country. That's why many analysts believe that German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her government are keen to ensure that the pipeline is viewed as a commercial project entirely separate from politics.
Many in the German political establishment don't see that it is worth pulling the plug on a project that for political or economic reasons they find potentially beneficial. And I think the hope is that Germany's neighbors are going to move on. They did with opposition to Nord Stream 1, and they assume that the same thing will happen now.
But the biggest obstacle to the pipeline is the US. As far back as 1981, the Reagan administration imposed sanctions on a similar pipeline project from Russia to Europe. As Nord Stream 2 nears completion, history is repeating itself. The Obama and Trump administrations deemed the pipeline a geopolitical threat, and towards the end of 2019, the US passed sanctions targeting companies involved in the development in an attempt to scupper its completion. Allseas, a Swiss firm specialising in undersea construction, immediately buckled under the threat of sanctions and pulled its vessels from the project, halting construction for a year and costing Gazprom a fortune. Many other international companies were also deterred.
In the United States, the question of European gas pipelines is a foreign policy question. In the last few years, it has been portrayed more as an economic question, but we had sanctions against companies building the pipelines to Germany in the early 80s from the United States. So this is a story that really isn't a new story, but it's a story that is coming up again. So the US has a stance that this interaction between Europe and Russia, this interdependence on gas, is a strategic liability, and that it makes Europe more vulnerable.
At the start of 2021, the US Congress expanded its sanctions net to include insurers, certifiers, and any companies supporting pipe-laying activities. As a result, 18 European companies have pulled out of the project so far. The majority are companies insuring the project, but also civil engineering companies responsible for running the pipeline's monitoring and safety systems. Russia is trying to counter the sanctions dragnet by increasing its stake in the development infrastructure, allowing it more control over the construction free from the threat of US interference. While this may mean they can finish laying the pipe, certifying the project to meet international safety standards isn't something Russia can pull off on its own.
One of the major issues is that the main certification company, DNV, withdrew from the project. Now, this project has all been built to those standards of that certification company, and we think that without that type of certification, it may become difficult for any European regulator to actually allow flows through that pipeline.
Supporters of Nord Stream 2 also claim that the US has rather more selfish reasons for opposing its construction. For years, the US has been trying to sell more of its own liquefied natural gas to the EU. One of Nord Stream 2's most outspoken critics is Texan Senator Ted Cruz, a major recipient of oil and gas political donations. For Russia, the delays and possible cancellation of Nord Stream 2 would deal a catastrophic blow to both its geopolitical ambitions and economy. Gazprom's gas sales to Europe make up nearly 70% of its gas revenues, while the company's overall sales account for more than 5% of Russia's $1.6 trillion annual GDP.
Russia doesn't have an incredibly diversified economy, and it has needed to sell a lot of its fossil fuels to Western Europe, which is the closest market, its main market, for decades now, really to keep the country functioning. It can do so through existing infrastructure, but by having new pipelines, it really entangles Western Europe into a longer-term relationship with Russia. It also creates the ability to have lots of new contracts.
After 4 years of fractured ties under Trump, the Biden administration is keen on mending relationships with Berlin and its European allies. However, the sanctions imposed by the US remain an affront to the Europeans for what is considered a domestic affair. For now, German politicians are working to find a compromise with the Biden administration that avoids sanctions. One possible solution is a snapback mechanism that mandates closure of the Nord Stream pipelines if Russia threatens Ukraine.
Germany point to legislation signed by Russia which says they will not circumvent Ukraine. How strong is that?
Whether Germany will be really in a position to push Russia back on that, we'll have to see. But the German position is we are a strong and important buyer. We are a geopolitical, weightful country, and we can push back here.
Even as Berlin tries to reduce the uncertainty surrounding Nord Stream 2, the country's approaching general elections, scheduled for September 2021, makes the project a domestic political hot potato. There's a strong chance that the German Green Party could enter government through a coalition with the conservative CDU, which could further complicate the project's completion. As the project enters its final stages, many stakeholders are watching developments in the US strategy closely, as tightening or easing of sanctions could determine the fate of the project. While the economic costs would hit Gazprom and the Russian state hardest, the impact will be felt across the continent. The successful completion or final abandonment of Nord Stream 2 could define Europe's energy strategy and geopolitical relations with Russia and the US for many years to come. Hi guys, thanks for watching our video. Please subscribe to the channel, but before you do that, we'd love to know if you have any ideas for news stories for us to cover. Comment below the video to let us know, and we'll see you next time.